let's talk about something. Let's go home a little bit more. We might even get a third one in here, but let's talk about this one: intimate partner violence. Right. So, I just so happen to be reading the CDC report, right, and these numbers jumped out at me. Actually, I was also listening to Dr. T. Hassan Johnson. Shout out to the Onyx report. So when you look at the percentages of folk who experience intimate partner violence, right? 44% lesbian to women, 26% gay to men. I thought we was more violent, but okay. Even with ourselves, we less violent than them when they. Okay, cool.
We're toxic.
61% bisexual woman. 61% bisexual woman. 37% bisexual men. 61, 37. Okay. And then we get to 35% heterosexual women and 29% heterosexual men. Now that's about a 7% difference, but it does not take into account verbal abuse, which probably blow this out the water. So, gentlemen, so what y'all think about that data point?
Well, it goes back to our previous discussions about myths. You know,
The myths that are destroying the black community and black relationships.
yes, 100%. You know, if we're toxic, if we are masculine, you know, because masculinity now has turned into a dirty word of sorts. You know, masculinity, they want to procure masculinity. They want masculinity in very specific spaces. You know, masculinity when it's time to pay bills. Masculinity when it's time to protect you in the home, regardless of what the circumstances.
Take that bullet.
Yeah, exactly. Take up for me, you know. And masculinity to shoulder the burden of whatever comes miscellaneous after that. You know what I mean? Like, keep them shoulders nice and broad. Protect us from this. Be masculine. All the way up until the point where you get to the decision-making part.
You know, those are interesting stats. But I want to back it up into how it plays itself out in real life and the philosophies that we teach and that we have. So, growing up, since people like these anecdotes, I'm gonna give you one. Growing up,
Personal story here.
I was told, never put your hands on a woman. I don't think I was alone in that. I think many young men were taught that, right?
All of us.
So now we fast forward to today, and we'll see something where a woman is trying to like run a dude over with her car, or
Ooh, yeah.
do something while he's asleep, and
Saw
then
that.
she'll say, but he lied. Or the number one,
The number one.
he cheated. So let's reverse that. So if I'm with a woman and I find out that she's cheating on me, right? Then I can hit her with a Buick.
And the bumper.
Yeah, just take her out, you know, put on El Dorado, bow, you know? No, you can't. There's no reason, right? But there's a reason to hit a man, and it's justified. There's a reason to murder a man. There's a reason to castrate a man. There's a reason to do whatever you want to a man because of your emotion. But you're not adult enough to handle that emotion. Break up with him, divorce, separate, go to counseling, do all that stuff.
Right.
But if the same thing happens, I'm supposed to have that restraint. Okay? Those numbers are legit and those numbers are fine and they're accurate. But I'm saying the real life application that we live looks like that.
You mean it's not a slow motion shot walking away from a car that you both physically own that you possibly could get in the divorce settlement on fire?
You
You
know?
know, with
Oh, yeah.
Michael Bay style. You know what I mean? Oh no, that's not. Oh, my bad.
With all his clothes in the front seat.
Yeah. Start tight, then open up. You know.
And then the women cheer in the audience.
Yeah, exactly. To a nice liberating song. You know what I mean? You know, Girls Rule the World. No, that wasn't out yet. My bad.
But all jokes aside, what we do have a violence issue in our community, but we have a violence issue in our relationships that goes both ways most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, let's give the disclaimer for the folks with the helmets on this watch.
Oh,
Right.
We not talking about Ike Turner coming in with cocaine on his mustache, slapping people around, okay? Right. But you got to say it because right? We talking about, because here's another study in what the studies have shown. Many studies have shown. Women are more likely to initiate the violence in a relationship, and they're more likely to use an object. That's because of the discrepancy in size and strength. While men are more likely to do the most damage. Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Given the physicality and the
physicality
nature
and the size.
Yeah.
But if you don't initiate that first thing, you don't get the second.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody needs to put their damn hands down and learn how to talk to each other and learn how to reason and learn how to work it out and handle those demons that's inside of you.
Exactly. Now let's look at the history of that. Let's look at the history of expression for black people in the United States under chattel slavery. You know, understanding that it was illegal for us to laugh. Okay? A very essential emotion, illegal for us to laugh for years. That would get you lashes. That would get you beaten. Even the term barrel of laughs referred to the slave putting his head in the barrel or her head in the barrel in the field to laugh, to release that emotion. A word like, don't sass me. The violence inflicted upon making eye contact with a person of authority. Look at a police officer and look what happens. Stare a police officer in the eye, driving or anything else, and see how you get questioned. It's that sass. There's a history that exists of us having to take emotions and suppressing them, and that was those actions were codified by law for years. And even if they weren't codified by specific laws on the books, they were codified by violence, and that violence still exists to this day. So there's no space for us to really express our emotions. And what happens is the lack of expression and the space to express it and the means to effectively do it doesn't happen. And we end up inflicting self-harm on each other by doing it. And then we do a further disservice by assigning it totally to men.
Well, you know, it's a trip because it makes me think of like a mother and father lose their child, their son, in something tragic, whether say it's with the police, and then they're on camera and they're like, oh, look how they're so composed and they're asking for peace and they're so dignified. Meanwhile, the Cubs win the World Series and white dudes out there burning down trucks and tearing up stuff, and they like, well, they're just celebrating, you know, that's the follies of youth. So it is a double standard there. But in order for us, see, it goes back to this. Everybody, there's this thing where we're trying to be separate and, oh, I'm this and I'm that. Everybody's black, black. And you can't fix something until you truly diagnose it. And everybody's trying to opt out of the bad stuff and just say, oh, I'm just this good stuff. No. We are all of these things, and we share the responsibility together, right? I will own the part that we contribute on the man side, and let's work on it. But I need my counterpart
to be on the same page,
equally accountable, and not give the excuse, oh, I was mad, that's why I slapped him, or I pushed him, or he's big, he can handle it, right? See, and if it's not for me, well, think about your sons. Do you want your sons being slapped and being put in that position? And if you're a mom and you saw the video of his girlfriend hitting him, how would you react? Okay, well, now you're that woman. So and those numbers bear it out. And I can't wait for the comment to go, well, where'd you get your study from?
CDC.
The CDC. I guess the CDC is no longer reputable because I don't agree with them. Right?
They had you locked up for the last 18 months.
Yeah, they was reputable enough to have your ass buy 700 rolls of Charmin and go hide in the closet because they said so, but not on this.
Yeah.
And the reason why I brought this stat up, because there's this, when we talk on one of our shows about the myths that are destroying the black community and the myths that are destroying black relationships. And one of those myths about the black community is that black men are hyper violent, right? And so what these numbers show, that when men are together in relationship, we're less violent than when women are together in relationship. When you're in a mixed relationship, when we talk about mixed, sexuality, bisexual on both sides, again, significantly lower when men in those relationships. And when we talk about heterosexual men and heterosexual women, it's literally statistically damn near the same, right? So there's no data that shows that we're hyper violent, right? So it's just a narrative that's destroying our relationships and destroying our community. That's how I want to point that out.
There's a natural inclination in men not to even argue with women.
Natural.
So I don't know how you go from he don't even want to argue with me most of the time to he want to slap me around.
All the time.
That's a huge jump.
Right.
That's a huge leap. There's a natural inclination in us to protect women.
Right.
And it's backed by most of our upbringings, especially since the majority of us are raised in single mother homes. So are our mothers saying, go punch the hell out of some woman? I doubt it, right? So our actual upbringing and background and everything doesn't fit the narrative. But the narrative is powerful for a reason. But we didn't give ourselves this narrative. So who gave us the narrative? And what is it being used for? And why are you so quick to cheerlead for it like it's good?
Right.
Wouldn't you want it to not be true?
Right.
But what if everybody took ownership? What happens next?
That's the question.
That's what
right?
happens next.
That's the question, right? That is the question.
No, then you got to take off your pink pussy hat and stand next to that white lady.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
We could actually use that ding of the elevator.
Yeah, that was dope.
Yeah, that-
dope.
like, that's
so you
perfect.
talk about pink pussy, you can make me get into feminism.
No, but we can get to that in a minute. But see, this is I want to just say this.
Shoot it.
Don King had King Promotions. Bob Arum had Top Rank, right? They ain't got nothing on some of these women. Some of these women are the greatest fight promoters I've ever seen in my life. And I'll say it because I'm gonna say it. Some of these women, man, start a fight in the empty room.
Sleep with the fist ball.
I'm like, the hell, and you gonna let him talk to me like that? Well, you was up in his face like you was arguing balls and strikes and stuff. But what you think that man gonna do, right? And so all of this stuff is part of issues that we need to resolve within ourselves. There's a portion of our community that doesn't even think you love them unless you fight.
Yeah.
That's a sickness.
Looking to some
Unless that emotion is coming out.
Exactly.
Because they've grown up in such a turbulent situation, peace makes them uncomfortable, right? If the woman can inspire a man, and if we say that to her, if I wrote a poem, how women inspire men, and they'd be like, yes, that's beautiful, yes, we are, we queens. Okay, well, queen, do you inspire peace? Are you an agent of chaos in every place you walk into?
It's always twofold. There's always the other side of the coin that exists, and we hate to acknowledge that. Like we can say, and you can use that inspiration things, like specifically for music. Like you could say, the amount of euphoria that Stevie Wonder makes you feel when you hear "As," and you reflect upon the people in your life that embody those things that he's describing with. And by the same token, if you're listening to things that are toxic like that, if you are listening to music that promotes those kind of things, why can't it also inspire the inverse then? You can't give it credit for one thing and then negate it on the opposite side. So if you're a young man in a household and you're surrounded by women, and you know, a bunch of women who say made bad choices, you know what I mean? And they're constantly talking about what men aren't. How do you expect him to embody anything about what men are? You know, because I've been in that space. I've been the little boy in there listening to 4 or 5 women who made terrible relationship decisions. You know what I mean? Now the triumph would have been coming into the next relationship, watching them evolve and make a better place for themselves in their next relationship, because I'm still there. I could still see it, and I would be able to see that evolution. But most of them didn't do that. Most of them made the same mistake again, you know. So what about your sons? What about your nephews? You know, how are you trying to invigorate change, positive change in them? Because there are certain things that we won't say around our daughters. There are certain things that we won't say around our nieces. You know, specifically anything disparaging to their mothers or the women around them, or even your own mother. You always meter that. You always meter that. You always try to give it some perspective. Like, well, you know, have an understanding of you try to balance that, because you want them to understand that that person isn't binary, you know, and you're trying to give them the full embodiment of what they are, and that people can make decisions that aren't necessarily in their best interest, or yours for that matter, when they're emotional and in that emotional state. But how often, even if you can reflect upon your childhood, you know, let's go anecdotal, you know, have you heard some version of that nigga ain't shit?
Bad faith.
Well, you know, now, yes, amen, ashe, and all of that. Here's the flip side of that coin. There's a lot of women that say, okay, well, what does a dad do besides pay? Well, I'll give you one for those that don't know. One of the keys to manhood is dick discipline. And it's not a speech that you're going to get correctly from your mother, because she doesn't have one. She doesn't know what shoots through a young man's body. Inside baseball, for those who don't know, the same amount of testosterone that's in a 35-year-old man is in a 15-year-old boy. And that's 25 years of difference of being able to handle it.
Right.
That 15-year-old boy is lightning walking around right now.
Right.
The discipline that you have to have as a man going into some of these volatile situations, you have to have that discipline to know different things, but to be able to walk away and eliminate from situations. But if you're led by your penis, you'll stay involved, because them crazy girls' puss be fire.
Hey, it's best.
That's
sometimes.
how
All the time that box is fire.
my.
And so if you don't have that discipline, you're going to fall in the trap,
Yeah.
right? It's our responsibility as men to teach these young boys. You got to stand on this right here, right? You got to have that level of discipline, and the sexual drive of men is literally insatiable. All right? It's not understood, but all of us men, we know, right? And it is one of the challenges in our lifetimes is to be able to develop that discipline. Fathers, on average, are the disciplinarians in terms of they draw a line, you don't cross that line no matter what.
Consequences.
It's not, oh, that's my baby, oh, this, oh, that. And there's consequences when you do cross that line. And it doesn't move, right? Because life for us doesn't move. You get into that domestic situation, your ass going to jail. Okay? And that's what we have to learn on our end. So that's why it's valuable for both of us to take responsibility and accountability so we can teach these lessons and move forward.
Man.
And so that those lessons don't necessarily always have to come And in our cases, not necessarily from their father, solely from their father, you know. And black men, we have to take a greater obligation to young men above and beyond what our direct progeny. Like, just because he didn't come from the seed of my loin doesn't mean I'm not responsible for this young man in that space.
Yeah.
You know?
And I like the anecdotal piece that you added to the game, man, because I remember as a young boy, it might have been like 11, 12, maybe about 12-ish, and I asked my dad. I was out here. I was in Compton in the summer with my dad, and I was like, just curious. I was like, "Yo, man, what happened between you and Moms?" And he was like, "Ask your mother." Right? Did not shit on her at all. Right? I get back home after that summer, and I'm like, okay, cool. Let me hit up Moms, right? I hit up Moms, and basically she was like, yeah, I fucked that up. I mean, she didn't use them words, but she basically said, I was just like off-hinged. She said, I used to yell at him. I used to get mad, and Pops used to like work these crazy hours, and then, you know what I'm saying? So I was born, and it was chaotic. Y'all know how, know how it is when you have a newborn in the house and Pop's working crazy hours, and, she was frustrated, and the more she yelled at him, the more quiet he got.
The more he receded.
And it pissed her off. The more mad she even got, the madder she got, right? So I respected her so much after that, right? Even more so as an adult man, in my experiences now with women. Because I was like, wow, man, my mom just straight up took that accountability. It's like, yeah, I fucked that up. And on the flip side, my dad had every opportunity to say, hey, your mama won shit, or she was crazy as shit, she was batshit crazy, he didn't. He took the high road. So I appreciate that. And
that also speaks to
shit.
JT's point about most of us are inclined to recede in the space of that escalation.
Right.
And part of that's not just within the home. We're taught in spaces of violence outside the house that when it's escalated with people of authority, that we have no choice but to recede. We have to dial it down because it could become life altering.
That's right. Don't talk to that officer like that.
Exactly.
Hey, don't even talk to the dude that you bump into at the liquor store.
Come on.
Like that.
Stephen A. told Marcus Smart in that confrontation at Oklahoma State, don't you ever dare put your hand on a white man. He said that on ESPN. And no one outside of us
was like, what?
What? Like what? Don't you dare. Like what?
I'm a college student, and that's a grown-ass man.
Who put his hands
on him first.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. It's interesting, and I've heard that story from Rob before, and the word of this discussion is anecdotal. That's only the third time in my adult life. Well, actually, two of those were stories I heard, and one I witnessed personally. On a serious topic like that, where a woman said, "I made a mistake. I messed up. I just straight out owned it, not the but you got to understand the and all the tap dancing, right?" And I would love to see a survey of how many men have heard that. That would open up the dialogue and conversation between us to such a level, and I don't understand why. Well, I know my bad was not invented by a woman, but I don't think our women understand how that could open up the floodgates in terms of conversation and communication.
Right.
But there's such a grip on being right. And I made a joke. I said she'd rather be caught dead than caught dead wrong.
Wow.
Oof.
And that's where we are in a lot of our relationships.
Yeah.
Just say my bad.
And this is what the reason and rationale why we are having this discussion. And oftentimes black females will hear this discussion and say, oh, they're angry. Well, we've heard this from people who listen to the show. are y'all angry? What happened to you guys?
Bitter.
You're bitter. All these things. When actually, if you listen very closely, we actually put the onus on us. 99.9. Even if we're pointing out something that we observe, we still put the onus on us.
Because we have the choice of how we react in the space.
And that's the why. And the why behind we have these conversations is to change and shift that narrative, to add some data to some bullshit that's out there. Why? To shift and transform Black relationships and improve. So shift, transform, and improve Black relationships.
Shit, if we bitter, then you can't listen to Mary J. Blige's 2nd through 4th albums. You can't watch half the Black movies in the 90s because all that shit was hot.
Hot.
You know?
Hot.
So, I mean, I was like, is this bitter?
then
Listen, I wish some folks would be as bitter as me.
There's a point where the acceptance of responsibility then becomes, we start to gaslight ourselves. You know? So if we're always in that role, where we start the dialogue with our bad, then it's a completely disingenuous argument, because now if we're the ones that always have to initiate it, then when the fatigue sets in, when we don't feel like taking the responsibility for, anymore, then how do we progress?
Right.
Then how do we get to that resolution? What happens is we end up just surrendering in the space.
Love Jones.
I was talking to a friend of mine, homegirl of mine. We're having a discussion. It was a ranging discussion, but I made this point to her. I said, let's say we step into family court. It is assumed you are a good mother, and we go from there backwards.
Yep.
Right? I have to prove
You're a capable father.
that I'm not good. Capable.
Capable.
Right? Good is extra credit. Right? So I started a deficit. I said, so how can we have a true conversation at what's best for our child when it's assumed that you're better than I am already when we walk through the door, right? So that's how we entered these discussions, right? If I'm sitting across the table and the ghost of Ike Turner is sitting next to me, right, and Mother Teresa is sitting next to you, then how are we gonna have a valid discussion about what's going on? We have to be able to say, okay, let's step down and be human with each other and say, hey, I have some anger issues and I did take a swipe at you. I got a bad mouth and a bad tongue and I don't like everything I hear is criticism and I go off.
Ooh. Okay?
So now let's work on it and let's take this walk.
Cool. Well, listen, with that being said, man, we'd like to thank everybody for coming in, for tuning in to Skinny Black's Lounge. Thank you very much, Ren.
You make it sound
JT
all nice.
with the period.
Or you could just say, if you want equality, you better work on your jab. I got a nice left, nigga.
Oh my God.
Better feint.
Show the roll.
Yeah, that's Mayweather Gym.
You know what I'm saying?
On Torrance.
So big ups to to everybody, man. Big ups to my man Gaston, Gentleman's Orderly. It's a go. Tally and Twine, love the watches. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna get everybody outfitted at some point. Hey, big shout out to Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, man. And Onyx Report, who are doing some yeoman's work around data, around masculinity. So
shout out to Yeoman.
Your man or yo man?
Both of them.
So, hey man, thanks. Tune in next week.